This presentation will be not that practical as the previous ones. I'm sure you learned a lot about how you do things, how you scale things. When I thought about talking about cocktail flow, I thought it might be better to tell you about the background, how we think about Windows 8 when designing for Windows 8, what is the reasons for those decisions, and hopefully that will help you understand your product also and make it a better fit for Windows 8. So basically, I'm Balint. I'm the CEO of Distinction. We are a software developer company focused on mobile. We're across platforms from iPhone, Android, Windows Phone, Windows 8. We try to be as diverse as possible because we're very much focused on the UI, and with our works, we always try to predict what's coming in the future. We always look forward, and we believe you can only do that while having a good balance between technologies. We love Apple, we love Windows, and we do see Windows 8 as one of the directions of the future, and I'll tell you some more about that. And I'm also here to talk about cocktail flow, and you might think, it's a cocktail app. What's so special about it? Well, actually, I don't really know as well. It's a good design cocktail app, I admit, but basically it's the highest rated app on the whole marketplace, and we have more than 100,000 downloads so far. It's a free app. So basically, I think the thoughts behind the design decisions, just the users love that, and that's why they rate it so high and appreciate the design. First of all, when you start designing for Windows 8, I thought about what are my emotion, my first thought about it. How do we start? First of all, Windows 8 is fresh. We used to having these interfaces, these evolutions, Windows, a lot of stuff out there, go in a lot of directions. And on Windows 8, we get a completely new approach. I use a MacBook most of my time. I'm an Apple fanboy, I have to admit. But every time I open up my Windows 8, and because I'm doing something with it, I have a kind of moment of relief, of freshness. The smooth animation, how the whole kind of applications come in, the movement, it just makes me relax and really feel how fresh the whole OS is. Windows 8 is also very clean. I think the logo says it all. One OS is very much focused on the basics, on the cleanness, on making it easier understandable. The other OS focuses on making it beautiful, making it lickable, making it so detailed that you see that retina displayed. I'm not saying that one is better, one is worse, but it's completely two different approaches. Windows 8 is extremely fast. I run it on my MacBook Air on virtual machines. It runs flawlessly. I've just installed it at my home, at my 4-year-old media PC, which at that time was a cheap PC, and it runs amazing. In the US, the car manufacturers had that trend of building larger, bigger engines into cars and making them more expensive, and they use more resources. And users and customers did buy that. But then came the Japanese with Toyota and Honda, and they had smaller cars which were more efficient. And nobody said that's going backwards in technology. Why would we want something less strong, less expensive? It's a way to go. And I believe Microsoft is doing the same with Windows 8. It's making it faster than Windows 7. It's making it more accessible. And this doesn't mean we're going back to the past, and why would we want to support older devices? This means we're getting more performance for our applications and have more freedom to do anything we'd like to do. Most of all, I believe, and I'll talk about this a little bit more, that Windows 8 is designed for the future. iOS currently is what is currently. It's a 5-year-old operating system and design. It's currently the best, we have to admit that. But Windows 8 is somehow showing the future. It's stepping to the next generation and trying to increase our productivity, trying to change how we might interact with our devices. And that's a very interesting thing. For one example here, so this is how I imagine in a very rough sketch how a notification on a Google Glass or an Apple Glass would look like with the current iOS trends. You have a detailed envelope, a lot of pen, maybe some handwriting to make it look natural. And this would be somehow how it could look on Windows 8. Of course, these are kind of huge differences, and you may say Apple would design something better, but it still shows the core differences between the approaches, and why I say that Windows 8 and the design behind Windows 8, I believe, is more future-proof. As we're going to get not just bigger screens, but also more devices, displays in our cars, our mirrors, everywhere. We probably don't want to see every time a letter that looks like a letter. We want to see probably just the core information itself. But most of all, Windows 8 is different. And a lot of people don't like it. We also heard a lot of questions, how are old guys going to catch up? They're used to doing this, they're used to doing that. We had a time where there was a company that said think different, and they didn't care, and everybody was cheering. And I still believe that thinking different is a good thing. It might not succeed, but it's definitely a good thing. It's just that it's hard, I think, to believe that a big company, which we didn't really like for its design and productivity in the past, can really innovate and create something really fresh, different, that can have the same kind of brand that the company which the slogan had. When talking about the future of design and how design evolved, I always think about, we are human beings and how we understand our world. Basically, this is a galaxy. What does a galaxy stand from? It's like from planets. On planets, we have surfaces like forests and trees. In the forests, we have trees. The trees have leaves. And then we can go down to the atoms. When I showed you the image of the galaxy, probably nobody thought about the galaxy is made of atoms, because that's not just what you think. My point here is that we can only understand a certain level of complexity at one time. And we build layers of complexity to understand them. When we know there are atoms, but then we see molecules, and then go on, we wrap them into, so when we think about galaxies, we think how beautiful they are because they are of stars and planets. And it's the same how it is in kind of the evolution of interface design. First of all, we had the command line where you could type in text, see text input, and basically you could do anything inside of it. But when we started multitasking, had better displays, it was just too complex, and we couldn't really manage the task we wanted to do with the computer. So that's when Windows came in. We had a new folder structure, files. It was much easier to manage, applications running simultaneously. It was a big achievement, and it lasted for a very long time. We even tried to do this on mobile devices. Windows Mobile at the time was one of the most popular smartphone operating systems. The problem with it was it became too complex. It had the multitasking functionality, it had the folders, it had the file system, it had the applications. It was basically a mini Windows on your phone, and as we wanted to do more and more everyday tasks with our smartphone, this wasn't convenient enough. This became too complex. That's when iOS came in. Basically, what Apple did was remove multitasking. Since then, we don't really have real multitasking in our phones. It's basically a small screen. We want to do one thing at one time. We have something called multitasking, but it's not the real thing. Also, Apple introduced a much easier way of navigating, larger buttons, more touch-friendly applications, and so on. Apple was also the first to introduce the iPad, which was a revolution in terms of tablets, because Windows 7 tablets were just too complex. You had to have a pen, you had the file system, you wanted to play a video, but you didn't have a touch area. Apple solved all the problems for us. No USB ports, basically, you could do, file system, you could do only a very limited set of functionality, but this allowed us to use tablets for a new set of functionality. It freed us up, we could build upon it. And I believe now what Microsoft is doing with Windows, that it's cleaning up the visual noise. We don't have glossy icons. We don't have textures. It's removing a set of complexity to be able to add the file system, other functions. And also, we are becoming more digital. The iPad was great to get my mother on computing devices because she knows how a notepad functions in real life, and she could transfer that knowledge one by one into her iPad or iPhone. But that's not the future, because with our devices, we will want to do more and better than what we can do with our physical objects. And that you can't reflect the real-life design on something that's not available in real life. So I believe the platform of Microsoft is freeing up a new layer of complexity which we can build on. It simplified the UI, and we can add other different new kind of functions which can lead us in the future. However, reducing complexity and saying does not come cheap. You have to do something in order for the users to understand the new functionality and how it works. When the first version of Windows came, we had the desktop approach. We had our desk before. We knew we had folders there and files and things like that, and that worked well. Apple was great by making everything look almost the same as real life. We knew those controls. We knew that a clock looked like a clock. A notepad had skin leather, and things like that. But on Windows 8, we are losing those visual clues. We no longer have the design of a letter notebook and knowing that here's my pen, here are the pages, this is the corner of the page, and you used to flip that, so that's what you do. So we have to introduce something new, something that's very important for users to understand. And just as the example before, if I throw a ball and it hits someone, you only see me like this, and then the other guy standing like this. You probably won't understand what happens. I believe that the most important and the one thing that helps us understand the best what is happening around us is the constant movement. We see the flow. When we're driving, we see a car suddenly behind us because we didn't see it approach. We get scared. And that's where Windows 8 excels. It has a lot of animation, and it also creates the space. Because we don't have additional Chrome, we don't have additional wood textures that we need to transform somehow and animate, we only have the core content. When we interact with it, it can help us, we can easily animate them and use animation really not as an eye candy, as we saw previously. Because we saw how Flash websites, used animation basically for making it, flashier, nicer, eye candy, but there was no real use. Animation and let's call it motion is becoming an increasingly important part of usability design and interaction design. Again, it helps us understand what's happening. I always remember when my grandmother sees a window just pop up. When she didn't know what happened, she gets scared. When she sees that transforming from here and there, she realizes, oh, I clicked here, so that's why it's happening. It's something that's very important and we use in Cocktail Flow a lot. It could be improved a lot, but it's a good start. Another example is the start screen of Windows 8. When you open an app, it kind of rotates inside. And this is not pure eye candy. Of course, it increases or it decreases the perception of the load time. You feel that the application loads faster. But the main idea behind is that you see which one you touched and how it's coming inside to you. So it's very easy to mistouch objects on a tablet. But you then understand why the stock application got started and why not the finance which you touched, because you see that you mistouch and that animates inside. Also, if you think about what visions are for the future, this is a screenshot from the film Minority Report, where we have now truly fluid interfaces. We do not have windows anymore. We do not have pages anymore. We do not have those in the real life as well. It's kind of going into the future. Windows 8 will not be this point, but when thinking about designing for the future and Windows 8 gives you the space to do so, it's something worth considering. I'll show you a short example in Cocktail Flow of what this kind of pages transition means. So basically here I have my list of cocktails, and if I tap on one cocktail, it doesn't happen in the Apple way or web page way that we have a new page sliding in. It's basically the cocktail which was selected slides in, and the whole page transforms into the detailed recipe. And when I go back, that cocktail goes back to the list. It's not a big thing. It's not something when you say, oh, I could have never thought about this, or I could have never designed this. It's just a small thing that makes users more comfortable knowing what's happening. Again, very simple. It's not used to do, especially developers have problems because current development patterns are structured into pages and the pages transform themselves. But again, it's something you can easily overcome, and with the performance of Windows 8 devices, animations are really, really fluid. So what I believe that truly fluid and pageless interfaces will be the future. And Windows 8, again, prepares us. It's not there yet. It's not something you have to do. But when designing, thinking about your content and your structure, keep in mind that where are you going in the long term. Now let's see some more practice and not just theory, how this works and what designing for Windows 8 really means. Basically, when creating a Windows 8 app, it's not just a set of adapting controls. You know, you had a list here, you're going to have a grid here, because it's, again, stepping to a different mindset. You have to think different. You have to think of your goals and what you're willing to achieve and being native to the OS. We don't follow Microsoft guidelines 100%. We developed the Sky Design and developed the Skyscanner app, which was used here for 2 examples when we didn't use the standard approaches. We share, I believe, a common mindset with Microsoft in terms of where it's going. I'm not sure because we're not talking that much, but hopefully. And we're designing in that methodology. Which exact controls we're using is not important, but rather what you're willing to achieve. And to achieve that goal, it's much more than taking a look at your iPad application on your web page and just, seeing, oh, this can be transformed here, this can be transformed there, and so on. Basically, many other before me told us that Windows 8 focuses very much on content, but it's also a very flat hierarchy. The goal of everything in the future will be to get information. You don't want to see just 3 menu points. You have to touch to go inside to get information. When you're going in a car or your Google Glasses, you won't want to do touch interactions. You're going to want to browse and see instantly, like on your live tiles, what's happening, what's the goal. And Windows 8 kind of flattens the hierarchy by showing you directly content, and you can directly interact with that content. A good example of this is our basically an Android tablet cocktail app. It's very glossy, a lot of textures, Bahamas, and things like that. But again, no real content. You can choose here like bar stock, cocktails, and guides. And on Windows 8, we flattened the whole structure that everything's open. You see here the cocktails by category are by drink, by color, by other themes, and you just flatten up the whole structure, making it much more easily accessible for the user. Also, focusing on content instead of Chrome. Chrome is basically the textures around the wrapper around everything we have. This is a cocktail list, again, on the same application. I think we have a lot of visual noise. This is what on that platform users consider beautiful, because this is what they are used to, and this is what they want to hear from us. On Windows 8, we basically have only the cocktails. We have small reflections, and we have a subtle background. But again, if you see what you see from these 2 screens here and there, here probably the wood and the old paper is what you are remembering. Here, cocktails, very easily, you can select them and go forward. Another problem, and it's a big pain point, is restructuring your content from horizontal to vertical, from vertical to horizontal scrolling. Basically, on Windows 8, everything scrolls horizontally. That's natural. That's how things go. And before, we did, because of the web and the phone's dimensions, we scrolled everything vertically. And one easier example here is our cabinet feature in Cocktail Flow, where we could scroll this vertically, and we changed it to a very simple horizontal scroll. It was much more difficult at Skyscanner, because seeing lists in a structured way, we had a lot of debates with the guys there on how could we solve this, and will this work, and will this not. And we came up with a much different kind of layout. It changes the whole structure. You have to make it different to maintain scannability. After using it for a while, they liked it very much. But again, at the first blink, they said it's no way they're going to go this way, because their conversions are going to go down and users won't like it. Windows 8 itself requires a time until you get used to it. But when you get used to it, you're going to love it. Again, this is a hard thing when you're working with your own company as designers or with other clients and talking to them that they should use this layout. use it for a week, and when you're done and you really think it's not good, then come back to me. And basically, because if you start with only Photoshop designs or basic mockups, they won't see how with real data. We do a lot of prototyping with real data and high-fidelity prototypes. We do not have that problem of the client saying, oh, this is complete, because we notified them on purpose at the beginning that we believe, as this is a new platform, this is a new approach. And until Windows 8 becomes mainstream and a lot of people have it, these approaches will be new, and that's something you have to keep in mind. Again, perfection is achieved when there's nothing left to add or nothing left to remove. This is very true for Windows 8. You have to try simplifying your content while showing more content. It's a very controversial thing, and basically, you have to reconsider about, especially designers, what we know about great design and what we think about great design. Again, Apple was a trendsetter in the past 5 years about great design, and they create truly beautiful, sometimes too beautiful experiences, imitate the real world, and Windows 8 goes in the positive direction. Just think about previously, we had our content and wrapped it inside, like this calendar. You have the core calendar and add letter and then stitches and all around it, and that was considered beautiful. Probably you wouldn't say for the Windows 8 calendar that it's beautiful. The goal of the application itself is not to be beautiful, it's to be very easy to use, easy to scan, and again, future-proof in some ways. I personally really don't like the trend that Apple keeps pushing even desktop apps in this very leather-like real-world life experience. It bothers me a lot because I believe that the workflows and the technical devices, we're really in a technical age where those people who want to use technical devices as their own real-world counterparts are going to get left behind. Technical devices are now getting overall skills. They are getting better than their physical counterparts, and we have to adapt. We have to be more productive. And again, as a lot of people have told us here before, complexity and visual noise is going to be a big problem in the future, and we have to try to eliminate that and focus on content. All I told you right now that it's a lot of work, it's a lot of thinking, it's going to be hard with your bosses and your clients. So is it worth it? Basically, we did some usability tests on Cocktail Flow because we are very interested in how this works out. And all users could reach their goals faster. Again, less pages, more content. These users were, of course, not completely new to Windows 8. They were new to the app. But compared to other versions of the app, it showed better stats. Also, as I mentioned a lot of times before, this is a great time to reevaluate your whole design strategy when thinking about the future. Where is your company going as your brand? Where is your product going? What are going to be the next features? Windows 8 is a good opportunity to test out new layouts, new concepts. So I definitely believe it is a point where you have to do more than just say, oh, okay, let's port this and see how it works, but really try to pull something new, add something new, and change the structure in a way that it fits well. And again, as I mentioned, we had more than 100,000 downloads on Cocktail Flow on Windows 8 while it's still in beta. And if Windows 8 comes out, that's going to be a huge number. I go a lot to US and a lot of countries, and Silicon Valley companies just don't really care now about Windows. It's a great opportunity. Everybody's in love with the iPhone and the iPhone 5 and how revolutionary it is. Some people like Android, but Microsoft is just not in the core. But it's going to be a 400 million device opportunity in 1 year. That's a lot of devices. And there's not that many apps right now. So the early movers always have the advantage. We saw this with Windows Phone 7. We were one of the earliest movers, and we got quite a good cash on Cocktail Flow, even though it's a very simple cocktail app. So I believe if you have something better and more usable than a cocktail app, which is, let's agree, not that the everyday use app, I believe you can grow a very large user base. So just to summarize it up, migrating to Windows 8 does require a lot of efforts and a lot of thinking and strategy changes. You must very much focus on your content. It's not trendy here to show textures. It does not help the user. And while we may see some new applications come this way, and at early times they might get some good adoption because people are used to it, in the long run, I'm sure that people will not like these kind of applications. Again, I encourage you to follow the guidelines because they help you. You can break them, not in a way that breaks the whole layout, but there are very good resources, again, on design.windows.com, and it's worth starting on it. Use animations to guide users. It's, again, not a very trivial thing. It's not a very easy thing. Most developers are not used to doing any animations, just the standard ones built in, but it's, as we saw, it's worth doing them. And again, I believe that this style of design could become a future or part of the future of where interaction and interface design goes. And early adopters who can adopt fastly and change their strategy in a way to use this 100% can win really, really big. So basically, that's what I wanted to tell. And any questions, I'm happy to answer. Yes?
So I noticed that you mentioned that you have apps for both. You have apps for both Android and Windows.
And iPhone, yeah.
And iPhone. Can you give us any tips as to how you would manage that?
Mm-hmm. We do everything native. We really focus on the user experience, animations, and performance on all platforms. What we do, we try to add as many business logic common as possible. So our business logic guys, each on separate platform, work together and try to structure the code in a similar way so that when they're talking about one class, the other guys are talking about the same class, so basically naming and structuring. Of course, at some low-level layers like database, this falls, but basically how managers and things work out, this helps them a lot. But on the UI, the frameworks are just so different on every platform that it's not really, if you're going native, and native is now the way of high-performant good applications, the UI structure will be completely different. And not because the design is different, but because the components and how the visual tree is built up on all three major platforms, Microsoft platforms, Android platforms, and iOS platforms, is completely different. So it's hard, but quality is never easy. That's why you do good quality, get better rewarded. Yeah, we had a question
here. Do you use any design tool when you came up with the design of cocktail flow for Windows 8? You showed an example where you picked on a drink, and rather than it flipping to a new page, it came in the middle and everything came at the sides. Did you, you had that thought in your head, or one of your designers had that thought in their head. How do they represent that to everybody? Did they use bits of paper, or did they have a graphical cartooning tool or bit of software which they...
Yeah. Most of our designers are developers as well. We have a lucky position here. All of the company members are engineering degrees, and we still do a lot of design. We can code extremely fast UI. So basically, the core idea of the animation wasn't this. It was that basically so the scroll bar scrolls to the center position, other cocktails fade out, and new content fades in. But then we didn't like that, and then we had this idea. But then you have the problem of where does that cocktail start from? Because the list is long, and you can have here from there. So it's very hard to prototype these kind of interactions and animations, which depend on a lot of variety of variables. And we do that in code. Again, we heard here that a lot of people don't advise it. I think everybody has his style. We can do animations, such animations and mockups in about 2 hours, and we do a lot of them. And basically, we still have to see it and touch it to feel it, to see what's good. We thought in our head the first version looked awesome, but when it was there, we didn't really like it. And then we went further. So that's how we do. We code prototype a lot, and then mark that code as prototype code and replace it later on.
But we don't have the luxury of coding.
Yeah, animations, that's what I told you, creating these kind of fluid interfaces and animations are going to be increasingly difficult because the MVC frameworks are page-based. You can't have some overall parts, and we previously did some things when we did Flash prototypes and the developers could see and replicate the movement. But I haven't really found any good tool to, in these kind of interactions, there are too many options. Is the cocktail here? Is the ingredient is this long? Is that long? And it's just, you won't think of everything until you see it on the screen. So I believe there's a big opportunity here for Adobe or anybody else who will create a truly variable dependent prototyping animated tool. Because right now, I don't know of any.
Why don't you use mono, actually? I thought that it might be less expensive, use Xamarin technologies, and even for prototyping. What are the reasons? You mentioned performance. What are the other reasons for maintaining several code bases?
Yeah, actually, real quickly, Mono, for those of you who don't know, is an open source implementation of .NET that runs on a lot of different platforms. So that was the question.
Basically, our own projects are a lot of time experiments. We want to push it to the limits. You want to try everything out, and with cross-platform implementation things, you just don't have those sometimes access to those features. You can't really add hacks upon a hack. It's a lot of experimentations, and again, performance is really critical for animations. And we want to have the best experience. And we did start with cross-platform tools, but there are so many bugs, so many problems. Sometimes they support. So when you use an open source framework, Apple updates the iOS to iOS 6, larger screen, your partner doesn't support it. What are you doing? So we really focus on, as I mentioned, Cocktailflow is the highest rated app in the marketplace. We want it to stay that way, or most of our apps to become in a sweet spot like that. And we don't risk compromising on performance and quality just to make it a bit easier. We have this methodology. We're not cost-driven. We're a quality-driven company. And that's the reason, basically.
So let me throw one more my thought on that in as well. Sorry, I'm stealing your spotlight for just a second. There's also, as Neil talked about in his talk, there are different paradigms and different navigation structures and different things. You are actually developing different apps. I mean, it's the same content and so on and so forth. But going back to something Bill said earlier, I'm not worried about in fact, I don't care about. I think it's bogus to try to have a consistent UI across different devices on different operating systems, because your user's actually not going to expect that. Your user's actually going to expect when they pick up an iPad that it looks and feels and smells like an iPad app. And when they pick up a Windows Slate, that it looks and feels and smells like a Windows Slate app. And so it is actually a different app. So, that's part of, I look at things like phone gap and those kind of things as useful. But one of the things that I really like that Jampot did, Mikey Wave. So one of the things that Jampot did is they will kick out your app in, for all the different platforms, but it's not exactly the same app on every platform. What they've done is they've written a native harness on each of the platforms. So it's actually a Windows 8 app. It's actually an iPhone app. It's actually an Android app that happens to run with a lot of the same content. But they're even doing things with pixel density and those kind of things behind the scenes. So you never have to see that. It just surfaces in the app to look correct for that particular platform and react correct for that platform with the right animations and so on and so forth. I'm a big, strong believer in exactly what Distinction has done, which is you write the native app for that platform because it's going to feel right and it's going to help your app get along better. If you're writing a simple line of business application that you can force down your user's throat and they don't really get a choice, use Mono, use Phone Gap, they're not going to care. Or they will care, they'll hate you, but they don't have a choice. If you care about your users, make sure that you're developing something specific for that platform. Jonathan.
What kind of cost-benefit analysis did you do when you were kind of counting out how many cocktails you're going to do? Because each cocktail may have 3 or 4 different ingredients, and you'd have to have the images for each one of those, and then scaling them up to the different resolutions and stuff like that. Did you kind of cross a mental limit saying we're not going to be able to have more than 100 cocktails because then the application is going to be 500 meg or whatever.
Basically, the Windows 8 app is not updated to that point, but we do have cocktail packages on our Windows Phone 7 Android apps, which you can download. That's how we make money, actually, of it, that basically there are free packages, paid packages, like Valentine's Day packages, a $1 package, and you get then 40 cocktails. We are thinking about converting to a web-based solution, which would be more dynamic. But because of the imagery and we wanted to have really fast, everything's there, fast search, it's kind of a tough thing. And again, Cocktail Flow is one of our more like hobby projects. It's always the first project we do when we enter a platform. We have it on 6 platforms, and we're just doing it now for the e-ink Kindle. That's going to be fun. So, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, question in the back.
Thank you for Peter. Just a question from Twitter is, a lot of the apps we're talking about today are consumer-based apps. They're information consumption apps. What about if you're creating a business app that maybe requires a large amount of text entry? Do you approach design differently, or how would you think about that?
Okay, so the question for those on the stream, hi there, how you doing, stream, is a lot of the apps that we're talking about today are more consumption-based apps rather than text creation and those kind of things. So how do you deal with things that have heavy text input? So do you want to take a swag at that?
Yeah, basically the touch interface on Windows 8 is touch first, which makes it very hard to add a lot of text. You do have the standard text boxes, and you can see the mail clients, and I think built-in apps which come are a great example of this, but I think complex text-based apps will either stay as a web page themselves or will stay desktop apps, such as we see Office and Word is doing. That's my thought. 1 second.
There we are.
So that's my email address. You can find our webpage and other applications on that website. And if you're interested, we're happy to talk.
Yeah, cool.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Thank you.